bit on us, if you don't know us. Our history really is mobile devices. We spent a lot of time supplying organisations with mobile devices in a warehouse, field worker, and the history really of Symec was around rugged mobile solutions in a field working environment. So I've known Graham and the team for a few years actually. We started off working together on Autoglass in another life. So I understand mobility really well, and our business really has started to look at, rather than what technologies use, I don't want to get away from the equipment itself, but I think the challenge here today was for me to talk a bit more about the data and the collection of data, and it's an interesting point for us, and certainly I guess the power of data was the theme. So we spent a lot of time with we've got about 250, 300 organisations we support around about 100,000 mobile devices we look after, and these devices, some of them fail fairly regularly, some of them need more than just a device. It's the charging accessories and the cradles and everything that goes with it to keep it connected and stay connected. And that enabled us to start thinking about, who had the kit. So we started to think a lot about what a business was doing with hardware. So we framed something up in our world called the connected business, and we were saying that most organisations, in some shape or form, were taking some form of mobile device, or were using some form of technology to collect data. So really our focus has been for the last 2 or 3 years to spend time with organisations understanding what technology they're using, how they're using it, where they're using it, and try and form some form of central place for them to manage those devices and manage that technology. The obvious answer, I guess, is mobile device management tools. People have implemented them over the last few years, but we go into a lot of organisations, and depending on whether it's the IT team or the ops team or another team, they might well have 2 or 3 mobile device management tools that they're using. So again, that consolidation still isn't happening. So we try and work with our customers on providing the right sort of device for the right sort of user that's got a really, really good solid platform for support around it, that's collecting data that we can centralise and present to people in one place. And I guess you'll see that on here. If you come over later on, you can see through one of our products how we're trying to centralise the information gathered, and I'll come on to it very briefly on a slide here. But to start with, I thought I'd talk through objects. We call them objects because we think about the different things that you'd be using to collect data, and we're taking obvious things like a zebra device, and there are different ways in which you want to use that device to collect data, whether it be a tablet or whether it be a really rugged device, or something less so that you want someone to use as a daily tool that, as Graham said, maybe is picking up email and WhatsApp and things like that. We got an interesting story of a customer that was using an Android device and their mobile app went down. It wasn't yours, someone else's. Highly unreliable, obviously, because it wasn't theirs. This went down, and for the day they couldn't do any jobs with the application. It was the only place in the whole business that had implemented Android, an Android platform, and they moved on to WhatsApp for the day. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but the technology that they've used allowed them, because of the Android platform they were now on, allowed them to use something that was every day, just for the day, to keep people going. So they were sending out jobs, getting confirmations back. They spun up a group really quickly that morning, added all the drivers to the group, and just consolidated people just for a short period of time. Now, that doesn't work all the time, but what it did show was that they were able to use today's technology in something that was a bit more consumerised, if that's a word, in their business for a short period of time. So it made us think, what more could we do with that? So we have an example that we use that probably sits nicely around Graham's survey and what the team have done. So we use a small product called a flick button that you could buy out in any shop anywhere, but we're using it critically for lone worker. So we've got customers where we've taken something that's consumer, brought it into the business world, and we're saying if you 1 click, 2 clicks, or even hold and press this thing, it will work as a lone worker tool. It's connected to the device, so there's that localization. It keeps the device unlocked and usable. We've got some data that says if you're constantly logging into your phone, you use it less, and you come back to it later on, so you're less likely to use the tools and the applications on the device throughout the process if you've got to continually unlock your phone. And you know, as a lone worker tool, really interesting tool. Another small story, customer had an engineer that was working at Tesco up on the roof, on the air conditioning, and no one had known he'd signed in because he'd just come into a big store, and he fell over whilst he was up on the roof. No one was aware that this guy was up on the roof. He didn't come down at the end of the day. His wife rings in to work that evening and says, "Where my husband's not come home." They didn't, because he'd not taken his mobile device up with him and didn't have any of his tools with him. He'd just gone up to check things out. There wasn't a process he went through when he went into the store, and there wasn't a process he went through to check the equipment before he did the job. They'd only thought about the application whilst he was doing the job. They weren't aware that he was up there and he had no form of communication with him. And the network signal, I think, was pretty bad. So he's up there overnight. They weren't sure what job he was at. So they had to go round, and late that evening, they found this guy on the roof in one of the stores, and it obviously caused a massive problem, not only for the store, but for the organisation that had supplied the engineer. And I think it just goes to show very quickly, if you've not got enough applications, and you're not thinking about signing on the journey or the story that Graham talks about, beginning, middle and end of the job or the journey, and you're not thinking about other technology that's fairly inexpensive that could support what you're doing with a mobile device, you can, I mean in their instance, come fairly unstuck, certainly for that user. Once we've collected the data, perhaps using other small complementary products that would complement the devices that we've got here, we want to present that data in one place. And we've spent a lot of time as an organisation thinking about why we'd collect that data and what we'd collect. So we're doing two things moving forward, looking at how much data we collect, and we're starting to think more about data being, it's called endpoint data a lot. A lot of people talk about there being some endpoint data, but we're starting to think about what we collect and why we collect it. So, you know, we're coining something around start point data. I've got a device, why do I collect all the information? I might not be allowed to collect that information, that's personal data. I don't necessarily have a right to have all of the information. There are a lot of organisations out there that have unions within them that might well take exception to some of that data being collected. So we're starting to think about, in conjunction with Graham and the team, how we can collect smaller amounts of data, but more important. So here's an example for us. We've got a product, small application that sits nicely on a Zebra device and alongside Graham's My Mobile Workers applications, that just collects information on the Wi-Fi, the network signal, memory, and also some storage space. So it's only doing 4 or 5 things, very, very simple things. It's MDM in its lightest form, if you like. And the reason we're collecting that data is because ultimately people want to know what the health score is for their estate, how much of it is working, whether it's not working. That's important information. Anything more than that might be useful to a specific pocket of people within the business, but generally there's only small amounts of information that are important. We might want to think about here what the signal strength is on each particular network and where in the UK that works. We provide multi-network SIMs and a roaming sim that looks for the strongest network. So you want to know the best tool for the job to collect the data. And then finally, our application thinks about things like what the battery strength is when you started the day, what it is at the finish, and we're starting to think about how we can incorporate some machine learning into that. So if I'm charging my phone and I charge it 10,000 times, at 9,000 it sends messages out to say, hey, you should send that in to be looked at and have the battery changed. So incorporating specific pieces of information into what we do. And I think once we've gathered all that information, and forgive me, the graphics not great, but we start to collect that data in different forms. Whether it's us looking at how those devices are used, whether it's us looking at the repair process they need to go through and support with Zebra, how we work with that. We're really starting to get an idea of the specific data that's required. So I'd encourage you going forward today, if you can, come and talk to us a little bit about how we're collecting the data and what we might do with that, because I think we've got an opportunity to help you really understand the best way and the leanest way with Graham and the team and ourselves of working on the right data collection and the management of those devices. So on that note, I think we're done. Thank you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.